Hello and welcome to episode 38 of the Freo Big Footy podcast. This week we'll be going back having a look at the victory for Fremantle over up in Darwin against Melbourne. Have a bit of a quick look at the Peel game, another key re-signing through the week, and then the upcoming clash against GWS. Joining us this week is our usual resident Victorian expert, Seppo. How are you, mate?
I am good and glad to be back for another week of footy.
Absolutely, and great to have you on board. And also joining us is another regular with us, Valkrum. How are you, mate?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. So just call me Mike Openers tonight, the late call-up.
Yeah, great to see you on board. And obviously last week Fremantle ended up getting a pretty comfortable victory in the end, 15 goals, 797 to 4 goals, 1034, after a pretty sort of scrappy, in particular, first quarter. But Fremantle sort of kicked off after half-time and ended up pulling away to a percentage-boosting victory, and obviously caught us up another 6% with the top three sides. And obviously keeps us in the mix for that, in particular, top two spot. What did you think of the game, Sebo?
It was quite interesting. Game sort of panned out as I thought it would. I thought Melbourne would be quite competitive and defensive, and we certainly didn't dominate early, and they did hold us up a bit. The biggest thing for me was obviously the conditions and the way that a lot of players, like Fife, even who sticks everything every week, seemed to drop the ball a bit, and it was slipping through a couple of players' hands, but the big highlight for me was just the anticipation waiting for Morabito to come on. And I suppose the big thing as well with that was the precursor to that was the excitement of having Aptness out there and having him get the late call-up for Pav. So it was good to see those two little really cameo performances of the recall of Morabito, the Beast Unleashed, and Aptness out there. So they're my main takes from the game.
All right, and what about yourself, Valkrum? What did you think of the performance last week?
Pretty much just a normal game as expected. Go through everything that you expect from a Ross Lyon coach team. It's not much else. I mean, obviously, Seppo's covered it all with, Morabito being back. The one thing I've really been impressed with over the last couple of weeks is Lachie Neale. I think we've definitely unleashed another one there.
Yeah, Lachie Neale certainly is sort of taking advantage of the fact that he's probably the fourth or fifth in line, and he's sort of able to go head-to-head, and particularly in those contested positions and stoppages, particularly in the forward 50, he's very, very handy. And even last week in the derby, we saw him kick a goal from a stoppage, and his just ability to get clean hands from there is certainly an added bonus for the Fremantle side, and particularly when he's a bit of a smaller guy.
Fourth, fifth midfielder picking up 30 disposals. That's, at a good kick-to-handball ratio too, I think, from the weekend from memory.
He did, actually. The other guy...
kicks and 12 handballs.
I'll just put it, yeah.
The 30 disposals for leading possession winner on the ground, it's great to see, and he's been up there now a couple of weeks in a row, and he's even getting involved with the tackles. So he picked up 8 tackles, and I think that's one thing at the start of the year that he said he was going to work on to help be another weapon in that part of that midfield. So it's great that he's actually getting the ball and getting those kicks out of the packs from congestion, and applying a bit of, for a smaller bloke like Ballas, he certainly loves the hunger for the contest and applying a bit of crunching tackles around.
Speaking of Ballas, are we allowed to say it? Are we allowed to put the two recurring letters in potential after his name this year? One's being A and A.
Well,
he's very consistent. I think he had a slow start, but the bags of goals he's scoring every week now is certainly going to put him in the spotlight.
And it seems the Victorian media have sort of jumped on board with him, but he's certainly getting a little bit more recognition, especially on the Fox Footy shows this year.
Well, that's why I'm asking the question, because the media, the Melbourne media guys are starting to say something. When they're starting to say something, that means that it actually must have been doing something for about 12 weeks now.
Yeah, absolutely. The other guy who probably played pretty well again last week was Nick Subin, who managed to give us quite a bit of good drive, I thought, from that midfield area. And obviously, when you're talking about that kick-to-handball ratio, Valkrum, the fact that he had 18 kicks out of 21 touches just just means that he's getting us that...
which I don't mind him kicking, because he's a very good kick, and 50, 55-metre kick every single time. He's got no problems with that. They've made a big deal about Subin and Mzungu going having conversation at, was it half-time or half-time?
Yeah, coming off half-time.
I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah,
like
keeping it set. I don't actually know what they were talking about, but I think it's going to come out in the Freo newsroom, the little video they release on the Friday. So it'll be quite interesting to actually hear what they were talking about, because certainly Subin and Mzungu were having good games. So it'll be quite interesting if it's about a simple decision on field and they're trying to keep each other's honest and accountable. But big thing I noticed with Subin getting on the board was actually we had a very good spread of goal kickers. I think we had 9 or 10, and it could have been even a few more with Sylvia, Morabito, and Aptness kicking very well. They got points, but they had at least a decent shot on goal, each of them. So very good to see a good spread.
10 goal kickers, 10 goal kickers. How good would it have been if Morabito had kicked that one?
Yeah, that last one, that was almost the icing on the cake for a fairy tale return.
It was. I think everyone was sort of standing, getting ready to stand up in their lounge room who were watching and celebrate.
I re-injured my back. I've actually got an injury at the moment, and I jumped up waiting for it, and he's missed it, and I've fallen down.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, he copped a fairly good crunching tackle too. His first touch of the ball when he came on the ground as well. He got a high for it. I think he got a free kick for it, but he certainly copped a welcome back to the AFL type tackle. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's great to see that he got through unscathed and got a good couple of touches as well. It's 5 was got 5 touches, but it's good for coming on as a sub and getting a hold of the footy. And for him, it's hard probably in those conditions. And you can see he played right on the outside, so he didn't get right into the thick of things. But at least you can see that he's going to be good for a full game this week and get into it.
Yeah, 8 touches. It was 5 kicks, 3 handballs.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the other one I suppose we could talk a little bit about was I've seen Aptness quite a bit down at Peel this year, and although he didn't get a lot of touches of the ball, I thought he competed, as Ross said, competed pretty well. Obviously you guys, I know you in particular, Seppo, wouldn't have seen him much this year. What did you think of him in his debut performance?
Well, I've heard a lot about him in terms of he was rated as one of the best contested marks in his draft, so it's probably really hard. When I heard he was named for a late call-up for Pav, I thought, it's probably not the best conditions for him to be, putting his best skills on display. But certainly was a nice unit and taking out opposition and his own players, hitting those packs. It's something we've been, dying for years. Yeah. So it's great to see he actually got up there, but I'd love to see him now get a full game and show what he can do in dry conditions and maybe some better delivery out at Subiaco.
Well, they always say that, you can't judge a guy just by the one game. You've got to allow him to get over that nerves and the feeling of running out there for the first time. And hopefully this week he should be a bit more accustomed. It won't be nerves as bad and he'll be able to go out there and actually be him. Because I remember at draft time saying, when I'm talking about Aptness, and I did a bit of research, and saying that, when Boyd went down, he had to step up and he was the man. So yeah, he has been able to do it. So.
And the good thing was as well that he obviously, probably the pleasing thing was that he did get 3 tackles as well. So even though the ball was down there a bit, at least he's doing the defensive efforts as well while he's out there. And as you said, I think it'll be interesting this week. I mean, he's obviously going to get either Moore or Phil Davis this week, and we'll get to that in a little bit more in the clash. Yep. But it looks like that he's obviously going to start the game, and I think it'll be a good opportunity because Fremantle, obviously, if they can get that second forward, whether it be himself or Gumbleton, they just definitely need that other tall target down there who can run through. So he's certainly going to give himself an opportunity to put his foot forward this week against GWS, and it'll be. I know that most of the supporters will be certainly keen to see what he can produce against a side like that. All right. Any other points you want to bring up, Seppo, about the game last week, or any other?
No, it's just good to get another win, and now 7 in a row. We're encroaching in on that 9 in a row territory we had. It was a good couple of years ago. Was it 06? We had 9 in a row.
Yeah, 05, 06, yeah.
05, 06, one of those years, but it'd be great to continue this form in and knock over a couple more.
Yeah, it was good to see Crowley obviously keep Bernie Vince pretty quiet last week as well, and continuing his good form, because obviously he started the year probably not in his best form, I think it'd be fair to say, but probably over the last 6 weeks he's gotten better and better.
That's a good point. It was interesting you went to Vince, and I thought he would have gone to Jones.
Yeah, I think he tends
I suppose Jones is more of a Mundy type that plays inside and is not really taggable too much because he's not damaging, but Vince can be, so it was good to recognise it. I suppose it's like that Hanley tag as well that Crowley went to more of a damaging kick.
That was genius. At my DT, but that was genius.
But he seems to, like Ross Lyon seems to have taken that Crowley's role this year to be taking on their sort of best break the line player.
Best outside midfield is what it seems to be going to this year.
Yeah, any guy who can break the line, they sort of try and work on him to sort of. They'll let you get the ball in close and in the contested ball, but then, they don't mind losing that, and if the ball goes out, and even a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to an Eagles mate, and they were saying that, they were letting Pritis go, even though he's sort of playing on Fife, but every time he was kicking, it was sort of like the referee was calling add another 6 tackles, with the sort of height part, and they'll just let those guys do that. And then as long as they stop the outside run and those better ball users, and I mean, Bernie Vince has been a pretty good ball user for Melbourne this year, so to keep his influence to really under 10 touches for the first 3 quarters was a pretty good effort again. And, he seems to be building up this year, seems to sort of mirror probably Fremantle's form a little bit as well. He seems to be getting better and better every week. Any other points, Valcrum, you'd like to bring up before we move on?
No, pretty much covered there, I think.
All right, no worries. Okay, the other, obviously this week, Fremantle second side, Peel Thunder, came up against the West Coast second side in East Perth and got a bit of a touch-up this week by 63 points. But it was good to see that some of our players who've been on long injury layoffs, like Tanner Smith, is back out and about. And obviously Sheridan, once again, is killing it down in that level. Fortunately for him, he's sort of too good for waffle level and just quite not consistent enough at AFL level yet. And he sort of just hasn't been able to bridge that gap. But once again, unfortunately, Fremantle struggled with getting in with too many tall players in there and just not enough midfield and runners through the game.
Yeah, Duffy was back as well, wasn't he? Kicked goal, I think I remember reading.
Yeah, 1 goal 3 for Duffy. Yeah. And obviously, and guys like Brady Gray and Wood and Pearce, so got a lot of Alex Pearce, got a lot of young blokes, and Vanderloo is another one, and even Craig Moller. So you've got a lot of probably young 18, 19-year-olds, and when you're looking at the East Perth side, who have got a lot of established and players like Brendan Lee, Josh Smith, sort of those sort of players who are Freddie Clutterbuck, who've been around for probably 8 to 10 years, they were just never going to be in the hunt against and Craig Wolf and those sort of blokes. They were never going to be in the hunt against a solid East Perth side like that. So, but it's unfortunate that we just can't seem to, get those guys on a winning formula down at Peel. So it'll be interesting to see what they do at the end of the year and whether they try and recruit a few more midfielders, not necessarily for the Fremantle side, but at least for the Peel side, so they can be competitive.
Well, one addition they're going to get over the next couple of weeks is going to be young Snapchatter. What's his name?
Josh Bootsma.
Yeah, Bootsma. So he's going to be joining that side as well. So hopefully he can add something.
Yeah, well, hopefully he doesn't, do anything too untoward towards our boys down there and poison them away. But it was also good to see De Boer go out there and also, by all accounts, played a really solid game in his first game back from injury, and he'll certainly be putting the pressure on those guys who are in the 22, because any sort of slip up by any of those blokes, and he'll certainly be trying to push his way back in. He'll leave no stone unturned.
The interesting one for me at Appeal at the moment is Gumby. He's played, 5 or 6 games or something at the moment, and he's only kicked 4 goals, sorry. He says he hasn't kicked a goal for a couple of weeks. That one, interesting there. I mean, he was, pre-season going well. He was, looking good on the training track. Looked reasonable in the practice match until he went down, but just doesn't seem to be hitting the straps in the Peel for Peel at the moment.
Yeah. I think it's hard to say because you've got to sort of, if you look at the Peel Thunder side, there's quite a few butchers of the ball in there. Like Brendan Jones is probably the most consistent midfielder for Peel, but he's a more of an in and under player. They really don't have anyone on the outside who is a very good kick.
Yes, good point.
If you look at De Boer, no one would say De Boer's field kicking is outstanding, but he's a tough, he does his job well. But if you go through and look at the whole list, apart from Sheridan's the only ball user down there that's in that group. I can't say enough about Brady Gray.
And the other one, Menegola, maybe.
Menegola, he's okay, but he's certainly not a brilliant ball user. And Jacob Ballard's
another one.
Ballard gets a lot of it, but once again, he's not a great ball user. Like, he tends to, he can hit targets, but you wouldn't call him an elite user by any stretch of the imagination, which is probably why he's never been drafted before this year. So until they can get some better users, it's really hard for any of those forwards, I think, to show a lot, which is probably why Apeness, I think, is probably
that the guys come up, yeah.
Well, not only that, but because you have to take contested marks when you play for Peel, because the reality is you lead. It's probably a bit like watching sometimes Nick Rewalt last week when he was playing for the Saints, and runs to the right spot and the ball goes over your head or doesn't hit the right spot. So
he never got a chance to take a contested mark. It was always kicked away from him.
Well, exactly.
Or to his opponent.
Yeah, so I mean, it'd be interesting to see what Peel do there, because obviously you want to try and breed a winning mentality for those players that are underneath there, and at the same time sort of get the right mix between talls and smalls. So it'll be certainly interesting to see which way Peel go next year with a limited salary cap that they have, to see how they're going to address that. That's for sure. All right. The other game, obviously, this week is Fremantle, who are coming in at $1 against the GWS Giants, but plenty of changes for this week with Fremantle bringing back Michael Johnson and Matthew Pavlich. But probably before we get onto this game, obviously it was great news during the week, Seppo, to see that the big Pavry signed for another year to go on. And it's just funny when you think back probably 2 or 3 years ago, it was probably a bit like the Fife signing a couple of weeks ago. Everyone was just hanging for Pav to put his signature on the paper, and this week it sort of went through to the keeper with probably hardly any fanfare at all. But it's terrific to see him back for another season.
Yeah, and it's great that he's actually just going the 1 year at a time, and he reckons his body's going to be good to go. So it's great to get one more name off that out of contract at 2014. But it's just great to see that Pavlich and Sandlands are keen to go around next year.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose that's the other interesting one is obviously, and we'll get to the outs in a minute, but unfortunately with both Garrett Ibbotson and Luke McFarlane with the calf injury are both outs this week. The other ends being Matt Taberner, Alex Pearce and Crozier. I mean, you have to wonder a bit about what McFarlane's going to do come the end of the year now with a couple of probably injuries in the last few weeks. The other ins and outs for the Giants, and they've got quite a lot of changes as well this week. Matt Bunteen, Lockie Plowman, Jacob Townsend, John O'Rourke, Tom Boyd, Cameron McCarthy, who was probably one of the guys touted for Fremantle last year to be their first round pick, and Rory Lobb, who's a ruckman from South Swan Districts. And the outs are Stephen Caniglio, who's a bit of an out loss for them with a thumb, Adam Trelaw, who's probably arguably one of their best players with a groin, Christian Jake is omitted, and Sam Frost omitted. And the milestone is that Jeremy Cameron playing his 50th game. So what do we think about the ins and outs this week?
It's a bit annoying seeing calf written next to both Ibbotson and McFarlane, but it's great to see that. I think on the open training session they had on the Wednesday, I've seen some photos from Freo's Facebook page that had those two running around. So unless they've picked it up on a late session today, this could just be a bit precautionary, and they're giving those guys a rest, probably because they're banking on Johnson to get up and another player coming in to obviously fill that role for Ibbotson or sliding some others around. So it's really good when you look at that interchange, and I'd be happy for any of those guys on there to get a game, especially at GWS. So we've got a great sort of set of options, and you just hope that we've got this game and one more, and then we're looking at a bye after that. So you think if there's any minor injuries that these guys are going to get managed well over not only this game, the next few, but the come back well fit and healthy after the bye.
Yeah. And what about yourself, Malcolm? Any sort of thoughts on the changes for this week?
Pretty standard, really, aren't they? I mean, Pav's an automatic back in. You'd say, obviously Johnson's automatic back in. You'd see Taberner, Pearce, and Crozier being the what's the word I'm looking for? Emergencies.
Yeah.
I suppose when you look at that interchange, if you had to pick, 3 to miss from Taberner, Barlow, Alex Pearce, Clancy Pearce, Sylvia Morabita, and Crozier. Yeah, who would you pick from there to miss?
Well, for me, it looks like Taberner, Pearce, and Crozier. For mine.
And that's Alex Pearce.
Yes, Alex Pearce. Yes,
it will
Clancy
be funny
Pearce being the sub.
If we do get Clancy, Alex, and Daniel all playing, I reckon this will be the first time they've had 3 guys out there with all the same surname that are not related.
We can even do the Pearce on, Pearce off a little bit more often than usual.
the 12th man.
And even their positioning, you can get one Pearce kicking to another Pearce kicking to another Pearce to goal.
Yeah.
Good, that's quite possible.
It's interesting. I reckon if I do think though if Stephen Hill wasn't injured, I reckon that Daniel Pearce would probably have a week off. He just doesn't, he seems to sort of cop a knock every week, and he hasn't sort of been running as freely as he normally does. Mind you, he always looks pretty good when he gets to about the 50. But
yeah, you think he'd stay in. I mean, we've got only this game, and then is it St Kilda, I think, and then we get a week off. So I think you'd play him through, and then he'd get that week off rest and a couple of rounds to go before finals. I don't see Ross Lyon hasn't really been a big guy resting.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
The interesting thing about Daniel Pearce and resting, he's actually played 55 consecutive games, and so he hasn't missed a beat since coming across to Fremantle. So it'll be quite interesting that they do look at giving him a rest at some point in time. And obviously with Helly out, he's doing a bit more work. But in front of him, we've actually got Crowley, who's played 68 consecutive games. And even further to that, Tendai Mzungu, ever since he returned from his PCL injury in his year we picked him up, he's played 73 consecutive games, which is just amazing.
Yeah.
Didn't Mundy hold the record there for a while though when he was playing off halfback before he moved to the midfield? He was ridiculously consistent as well.
You have to go back a couple of years, but it's great to see that some of those guys, hard workers.
It'd be interesting to see as well how the Giants structure up forwardly with their side, because obviously they're going to have Cameron and Patton in, and then you've obviously got, like, on the bench they've got two more key forwards in Tom Boyd and Cam McCarthy, and a ruckman in Rory Lobb. So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, the interchange, you'd have to think, well, at least the first three guys in Callum Ward, Tom Scully and Hoskin Elliott are definitely going to play. So obviously a couple of those bigger guys will miss out, but it'll be interesting to see which way they decide to go, because there's been a lot of talk about John O'Rourke and clubs, particularly in Victoria, trying to get their hands into him because he's not getting a game, and whether they leave Boyd out for another week and McCarthy and Lobb, or whether they decide to play, because they're two WA boys, whether they decide to bring him over and have a game in that regard.
It's interesting. I mean, then you get the whole conversation of Tom Boyd. I mean, he seems to be behind Cameron and Patton, yet he's the number one draft pick, so there's the whole conversation around that too.
You'd think he might be the most likely candidate out of those. If you do go with Ward, Scully and Hoskin Elliott, that if you were to pick one more of O'Rourke, Boyd, McCarthy and Lobb, that you would go Boyd, unless that puts them too tall, and against us, that might be a good chance for them to stretch us. But
Eagles tried that; they lost.
Yeah.
Do you think Crowley's going to go to Dylan Shield, or do you think he'll go to Callum Ward?
You'd think Ward. He looks like the better user of the ball, and if Treloar was out there, maybe
I would have said Treloar. Yeah, that's my
he's
first
not out
thought.
there, so
that's right.
He's not in that side, and it could be Callum Ward. Looks like the next best user out there for them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And obviously, a bit of a return to Fremantle.
Go to Palmer and just get some revenge.
Yeah. So, it's good to see Reece Palmer obviously getting a
regular, consistent.
He's probably starting to show a bit of the form that he did prior to
Barlowgate.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. And I think that really, I think it really did affect him quite badly as a player, and obviously he seemed to lose all confidence. And hopefully he will get back to his, have a good career. Because although he sort of did leave in the end, the reality is, to be fair, he'd be struggling to get a game in our side now with the midfield the way it is. I mean,
but his first year was very good though.
Oh, he was absolutely.
For a rookie player, it was very good.
And I think that knee didn't help him either, And it's probably a bit like McManus.
Comes back and then does someone's shin, yeah.
It's probably a little bit like McManus though. Sean McManus, if you speak to guys who watched him when he was under 18, it was a terrific kick, and 3 knee recons later, and he struggled just to hit targets anywhere near like he used to. And unfortunately, injuries can do that to you, and just sort of never sort of get back to the way you were as a player. But as I said, at least he seems to have found a better role as that high half forward, goal kicking forward, rather than being a sort of straight out mid. Obviously, Toby Green will be back this week as well in there, so hopefully he'll, after his hiatus, and hopefully he doesn't do anything silly out in the field. But he's another player who sort of had a terrific year last year and then sort of stagnated a little bit from there. So, the other key one obviously is that I'm probably keen myself to see is probably Josh Kelly, who was son of a former WA player. And Phil Kelly and Sandover medalist, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes on the expanse of the Subiaco, because he's certainly shown a little bit this year in his games.
I'm sorry, and I'm keen to see how Mumford goes up against Sandlands, because he seems to be the only one physically able to shove or physically compete with Sandlands. So be keen to see.
Sandlands hasn't been tested for weeks, and you're right.
Exactly.
Mumford is a type that could really test him, at least compete him and bash into him around the ground. So hopefully that Sandy doesn't cop any stray arms and legs, and it's happened too many times in the past when you've got those aggressive ruckman types that seem to get all over him.
It was probably not a bad moment for Sandlands to get tested. Give him now. Then we got who's he got next week? McAvoy at St Kilda.
We've got Carlton the week after. So
McAvoy's gone now from the Saints. He'll probably be longer.
Yeah.
So
he's not going to get. You wouldn't think he'd have too much issues against Longer, and then Carlton, well, who knows what they're going on with their rucks.
Yeah.
Well, another matchup, if you're looking at aptness, taking the fullback of Phil Davis, he's returned now from a couple, I think last week, his return after that long layoff with his major injury. I can't remember the details of it, but he's a very good fullback, I reckon, Phil Davis, and this will be a great test for aptness, and just hope the weather conditions, I haven't looked at the forecast, how it's going to be Sunday afternoon, but you just hope it's going to be conditions that suit aptness and be able to get a lot of good delivery and hopefully stretch Phil Davis and hit these packs hard and hopefully have Ballas and Main at the feet.
You'd have
They're
to
saying
think,
sunny and 19 for Sunday, so...
you'd have to think that Phil Davis would go to Pav first up, though, wouldn't you? And then they'd leave more on Aptness. And then
Depends where they go. Phil Davis normally plays deeper, same as like the Zach Dawson role normally plays the deeper role.
Yeah.
And the way they've got it lined up, they've got Aptness at full forward and Pav at centre half forward.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see which way they go, but it'll be interesting to see whether they even decide to try and maybe run both forwards, Aptness and Pavlich, from a deep position. Use Main as your outlet player. But then, as I said, it depends on the way they use Zach Clark as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they rotate it through. And
It's not a bad idea because then you start Moore and Davis will have to start back on them, and that means that they can't leave and go over, be that third man up. They have to actually watch the guy on the lead.
The only thing you won't get from that is good crumbing. Like I suppose if you've got Clark, Aptness, and Pavlich all up there, that you're going to need Ballantyne pushing right up and someone extra. So one of those three taller guys, you won't get that sort of standard resting ruckman pushing there. One of them will play higher up the field, and maybe that's a chance for Clark to get right up the ground because he certainly does his best work, and he's got a great kick inside 50, I think, Clark. So,
well, Sandlands hasn't really been pushing too much forward. He's been pushing backwards lately.
He's actually been quite key in those sort of cut-off defensive marks. So I like the way that Sandlands has that sort of zone off the half-back and almost that get-out kick when we've got that defensive play. And he pushes around, but we've really seen Clark do that work running forward, especially when you've got kicking into the paddock, that Clark's got that ability to run forward and onto the ball, start him up in the wing.
I reckon Clark's a better kick off 1 or 2 steps than he is actually when he has to stop and do a set shot. When he's actually just 1-2 steps and kicks it, and he kicks it 50-55 and pretty accurately.
He's one that looks more confident kicking long distance than he does if you give him a short, straight set in front.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And I think the interesting thing, I think that might be the way Ross has sort of set it up a little bit as well, because we've generally tried to stop the run through the middle, slow the game down a bit, and then obviously that allows time for Sandilands to get back and be that sort of third man cover down there when obviously we haven't got Johnson and McFarlane in there. It'd be interesting to see when we get our full side back whether they change the way that Sandilands has been used a bit, because we were sort of using that shotgun even a little bit more with Sandilands back in that defence more than we had in the past. So it'll certainly
we've had to do that for a couple of weeks now because it's been a while since we've had the standard Dawson, McFarlane and Johnson. So we've had Silvani in there for a while, and even now we've only got Dawson and Johnson there, even without Ibo as the third loose tool. So someone else down there has to play that role. Yeah.
Or Taberner 2 weeks ago.
Taberner's had that gig as well. So it'd be interesting to see who they put in there to get that. And I think Mzungu's been doing a good job of it. And the way that Ibbotson played last week was almost back to that AA form he was last year, I think, before his injury. So there's someone else that's got to step up and do that role of the loose man.
Yeah. Before we we'll just get the tips, and then we'll just bring up a little point that you just made up there, Seppo. So what do we think the result will be this week, Seppo? What's your prediction?
Well, I think even though the squads aren't finalised, I think we're going to have a very strong side, and GWS are missing some real key players like Treloar, Cornelio,
Frost.
And even Frost and Shaw as well, who hasn't come back up from his injury. So there's some key players for them out. I think we could be looking at the 70 to 75 point margin. I think the guys are really going to conserve and almost go into, I think someone said on the board this week, cruise control in the last quarter. But you think you'd have the game wrapped up and looking about 60, 70 point margin.
What about you, Valkyrie? What do you think?
Well, looking at last year, I think actually Giants came in with a stronger team last year when we touched them up by, near on 100 points. So I think we'll be pushing around that 70, 80 point mark as well.
Yeah,
And even cruise control, it's in the fourth quarter because our guys are so much fitter. I think cruise control, when we say cruise control, is still a lot faster paced than what the Giants are going to be at. So I see it probably being tight-ish in the first half, and then the second half. Well, I say it's the story of the year: tight-ish first half, and then second half, Freo pull away.
Yeah. I think this could be a game, particularly when we've only got 2 weeks to the bye. I reckon this might be a game where Ross Lyon, particularly because percentage is going to be so important, and there's only 3 to 4% between us in fourth and the top side in Sydney. I reckon this might be a game where, they're not going to sort of go, go full on at it, or like just do what you like, but they'll stay within the structures. But I think they'll be more than willing to take a bit more risk through the middle of the ground in order to try and get that score. I mean, I think they'll be trying to push for a 3-figure win, because if we can, the top 2 spot is crucial come the end of the season. And I think any chance, and realistically, this next 3-week block for us is going to be our best opportunity to build a percentage. I mean, the other game probably, even Brisbane up there are a little bit more competitive. The Hawks, Geelong and Port games are always going to be a little bit closer. So I think this, with the bye coming up in 2 weeks, I reckon they're really going to have an opportunity to sort of say, well, Ross is going to say we need to put the pedal to the metal and sort of try and, keep them low. But at the same time, if we can score that 100, 120 points, 130 points, it will certainly help solidify ourselves on the ladder. So I'm going to go for a little bit higher. I realistically think we're probably 4 to 5 goals, 4 goals at least per quarter better. And then a couple of quarters, I reckon, will sort of kick away a little bit further. So I think we should be aiming for around about, I think we could get close to 100 points this week. But obviously it will depend on how we go, just because and also because Fremantle know how many players have got to come back into the side, that they just don't want to give anyone an even break and give Ross Lyon a chance to drop them either. So
well, I suppose it's interesting looking at the line. It's 69.5 points, so there might be something there if people want to have a look at that. And I'm just having a look now to see what the 100-plus point win is, because it's certainly you made a good point about getting right up to that relentless style, and that more attacking footy is something we could be looking at. So
yeah, and I think you're right though, and that percentage makes a big difference. I mean, we're what are we 137, Port 139, Hawthorn 142. So
yeah,
and then daylight to Geelong. So
$4.80 for 100 plus for Freo. Bit of value this week.
Yeah, not normally that sort of style, but I think, and you said it's unusual for Fremantle to win by that many, but just looks like one of those games where they could, really push it out. So it'll be interesting to see what it goes. Before we head off today, guys, just when you were mentioning before about All Australian, obviously there's been quite a bit of talk about which players are sort of pushing for All Australian 2/3 of the way through the season. Where do you see? I mean, obviously I think Sandilands is probably, and Fife would be the two major
lock
locks. But who else do you think in the Fremantle side? Obviously, you were talking a little bit before about Ballantyne.
I'm big on Ballantyne's case this year, not just because he's a Fremantle guy, but I'm big on him. When you look at, I think
his competition that hasn't been consistent. Yeah.
Well, his competition's Luke Bruce. You could previously say Jamie Elliott, but he's been out injured for a couple of weeks now, and Eddie Betts. I think they're really the only threats to that small forward position.
Yeah, I think if Jamie Elliott was playing all season, he might be a better chance. But as you said, he struggles a little bit more when they, when you're injured. And I don't care what anyone says. If you miss the first 6 or 7 games and you play the rest of the season really strongly, you can make All Australian. But if you play the first 14 games awesome, and then you miss the next 7 weeks, you got no chance.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with McFarlane last year. And then the other guys, he probably played as well as anyone. But if he missed the first 6 or 7 games and played the last 14, he would have been probably a lock to get All Australian. But that's just the way the system is. I think the other smoky for us might be Paul Duffield. I think he's had a sensational year.
They're going to go with someone they'll go with McVeigh, they'll go with Smith.
Players like Hibbert have been pretty good again. He was close last year, I think.
They'll go with those guys before they'll pick Duffield.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised.
I agree with you. He's been good, but
yeah, I just think he might be a smoky this year, just because his ball use has been so good. And even last week, especially when we had those 2 or 3, as you said, that rotating key defence in there, he's always been one of those guys who's been managing to hold the defence together. And probably 3 or 4 years ago, I thought he was sort of on the edge of whether his career was going to continue or not. But credit to him, he's certainly turned it around, particularly since after he had that sort of ducking the head or did that turtle thing in the game and he got dropped for it. Since then, he's certainly hasn't sort of taken a backward step since then. So, any other guys you think would have a possibility of getting a chance?
It's just Johnson, but is this 4-week block going to hurt him? 5-week block he's had off.
Probably been missing too much.
Yeah, it'd certainly be. Yeah, you couldn't imagine any other. I think, as you said, we've got the 2 locks, and then the other, as you said, Ballantyne. If he keeps this vein of form up for the next, 5 or 6 weeks.
Monday will make the squad again, you'd think, like he did last year.
Yeah, he'll be around the mark, and I mean, him and Barlow are always usually there and thereabouts. But
in discussions, yeah, whether they make the final team, because they'll go, they go the stock standards in. Well, whether Ablett will make it still, but Ablett, Pendlebury,
Well, the other
Selwood, they always pick those guys over most other people.
The other one we've got to consider as well, obviously, is takes a week, misses a game for a week, and we sort of tend to gloss over him as well. Has been Stephen Hill, who's been sensational for us, and his ability to break line and his ball use has just been first class all season.
Yeah, and Stephen Hill is one for even internally. He could be up for a top 3 finish in the best and fairest. So. Shame that he's missing a couple of games, but if he was playing right the way through, and you can, if you want to keep going, you can throw Daniel Pearce in there. But I think he's had too many games where he's gone missing. But his good games have been fantastic.
Yeah, he just seems to have lacked that consistency, as you said, that you need to have to be to get a All Australian spot. So, all right. Any other points you want to bring up, Seppo, before we finish up this week?
Not this week. It's a nice quiet week, and let's just hope we have some great results on going our way with other sides around us to just push and nudge ourselves further into that top position.
Okay, and how about yourself, Valcrum? Anything else you want to bring up before we finish up?
Just hope I see some more excellent work from our management team with some good signings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've only got one left, really, now, haven't we? With
well, there's still McFarlane. I think Morabito as well.
You've got De Boer, Morabito.
Yeah, and De Boer, they're the 3. And then you've got the guys who haven't done a lot, like Duffy, Simpson, Hannif, I think you'll find.
Kepler, Gumby. So there's a couple there.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is they've got to get through to 3 of them, and that's probably not the... Maybe during the bye week we could have a look at which players we think will survive the cut, so to speak, because obviously they do need to get rid of 3 players come the end of the season. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean... They've also got the option, of course, of doing if they end up dropping someone like Kepler Bradley off the list, I mean, they could always redraft him because I don't think any other team's going to come forward and take him off our hands, sort of thing. So they've always got that option as well, depending on which way they want to go and how they use the rookie list. Because Menegola's on his last year as well, so they're going to have to make a decision about him as well, which will be interesting to see which way they decide with that. I'd have to think at this stage you'd probably struggle to get a spot, you would think, but you never know. All right, thanks again for joining us again this week, Seppo.
No worries, and see you all next week.
Absolutely, and once again, Valcrum, thanks for coming on board and filling in for us again this week.
Not a problem.
Excellent, and we'll see you all again next week, guys. Let's hope Fremantle gets away with a comfortable victory, and hopefully by the end of the weekend we should be hopefully sitting in the top 2. That's it for this week. See you next week. Bye for now.